Okay, welcome back. It's been a while, but hopefully we'll be back for a consistent amount of time. All right, we are up to Mishlei Yud Beis Daled 12:4, and this one is not, to my knowledge, is not connected to what we've done in the past. So, which is good because it's been a while. Okay, so Eishes Chayil Ateres Ba'ala Ukarakav Ba'atzmosav Mivisha. I just actually want to check and see. This might be the first time that it uses Eishes Chayil in Mishlei. Not that it uses it a lot in general. There are different women in Mishlei that are described as good. But I just want to see if this is the first instance. Yep, this is the first instance of Eishes. Oh, there's only two instances of Eishes Chayil in Mishlei. Okay, fine. There's this one, and then there's the famous Eishes Chayil at the very end of Mishlei. Okay, so anyone want to take a stab? I know some of the words are foreign, but you want to try translating? Eishes Chayil is a hard thing to translate.
Oh, woman of valor.
Okay, so the way people translate it, I don't know who initially started this translation. A woman of, let me do this, okay. An Eishes Chayil, okay, and then we'll do an asterisk to give different translations. Okay, so one is a woman of valor. Now, what does that mean? What does valor mean?
I think of it as like prestige or something.
Interesting. Okay, that's interesting. I think of it
bravery, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's what I think also. Yeah. Let me see. Valor. Yeah, great courage in the face of danger, especially in battle. So where do you think they get that from in the phrase in the word chayil?
Like chayil? Like
right. It's the same word as soldier, So I think that's probably maybe related to where it comes from. Okay. Another meaning, which I you don't hear people talk about Eishes Chayil in this way, which is surprising given the word chayil. Can anyone have another phrase that comes, a pasuk that comes to mind just with the word chayil, not Eishes Chayil, but chayil? I'll try to find it while.
Yeah.
It's in Devarim, in Akev. Okay, let's see if we could find it. I don't know where in Akev it is. It is in the part about Birkas Hamazon. Yeah. So it says. So this is talking about when the Jews go into Eretz Yisrael, and they have to be careful not to. This is Devarim 8:11. Be careful for yourselves lest you forget Hashem your God. And you don't keep his mitzvos, his judgments, and his statutes that I command you today. Lest you eat and be satisfied and build good houses and settle. Okay, and it goes through all the stuff and you become rich. And then it says what's going to happen. You shall say in your heart, yadi asali es hachayil hazeh. My strength and the might of my own hand made for me this chayil. And you should remember, Hashem your God, He's the one who gave you the ability to make chayil, in order to uphold his covenant that he gave, that he swore to your forefathers this day. So what does chayil mean in that context? Anyone?
Like a victorious soldier, maybe?
No, it's I guess I kind of skipped over the one clue. Uvakarcha v'tzoncha yirbiyun, and your livestock and your sheep will multiply. V'chesed v'zahav yirbelach, and you will accumulate silver and gold for yourself. V'chol asher lecha yirbe, and everything that you have will increase. So chayil means wealth. Okay, and if you look at Onkelos, he translates it as the same belibach. You will say in your heart, Cheli utkof yadai knali yas nichsaya ha'ilen nechasim, or nichsin also in the next pasuk. So it means wealth. So the second translation is a wealthy woman. Okay, and that sounds weird, but if you are familiar with Eishes Chayil, what are the chief activities that it describes her doing in Eishes Chayil is money making. She's buying and selling fields. She has a vineyard. She's making clothing to sell, and belts and stuff like that. She's managing the household, economics. So that's a second translation. And then the third translation is, so it's funny. I don't know why there's no Matsudas Sion here. Okay, but if you look at the Matsudas Sion on the on Eishes Chayil that we're familiar with, Eishes Chayil mi Yimtza V'Rakov Mikra, Eishes Chayil Retzelmer Zriza V'Yashara. Zriza, how do you translate Zariz? Zrizin Makdim and Limitos. It's kind of hard to translate.
I don't know the exact translation, but I always associate it as like, quick to do a mitzvah.
Yeah. So that's good. Yeah. So Zariz, and what about Yashara?
Straight.
Straight. Yeah. So the third. Oops. What happened there? Third translation. Oops. Sorry about that. Third translation is so Zariz is like you could translate it as like, I don't like the word. I've seen translated as diligent, meaning that, but it also has like this kind of like connotation of efficient. Like you're saying, like quick, not in the sense of like. Say again.
I was sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I feel like I've seen it translated as like zealous, and I feel like that encapsulates to the quick.
Right. The only problem is I feel like zealous is attached to like religious zealotry, which it might work in other contexts, but like in the Mishlei thing, like she's not like zealously like sewing her clothing and like making aggressive, So I'll put it down anyway. Diligent, efficient, zealous, and upright. Okay, and then similarly, I don't know why. Oh yeah, here we go. The Targum says Itza Kasharta. Okay, a kosher woman. Okay, doesn't mean kosher like in the cannibalistic sense. It means like kosher, like proper or fit or like she behaves in a way that's kosher. So I would say, I'll just add that here. Okay, is kosher in behavior. Okay, or in conduct, let's say. Behavior. Yeah. All right. So these are a bunch of options we have for Eishes Chayil. Okay. And really, it turns out that of these four, valor is just the hardest to define. But Sadigon, I know we haven't translated the rest of the pasuk yet. Sadigon says Eishes, and he translates it as Isha Ba'alas Chayil, a woman who has this quality of Chayil. Okay. So let's see if anyone can. This is a very tricky question I'm about to ask. Okay. Why does he have to clarify this grammatically? In other words, what misunderstanding might you arrive at from the word Eishes Chayil? And it has to do with gender.
I mean, if you say Eishes Chayil, maybe it's like you're married to this individual, but Isha Bala Chayil is, it's like if you say it's a quality. It's not like a definition of the person. It's like,
okay, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, that definitely is a possibility for what you get. I mean, that you definitely get that from Sadigon. I think I suspect it's a more fundamental thing, which is is the word chayil masculine or feminine?
Masculine.
Masculine, right? So you might misread this as the wife of a man who is chayil. Okay, and what he's trying to do is he's trying to say that this quality of chayil is a description of her. Okay, and I think that everyone holds that. I don't think anyone, at least on this pasuk that I saw, I don't think anyone says that it's a description of the man. But that's what he's trying to clarify. Okay, so we have here Eishes Chayil Ateres Ba'ala.
The crown of the husband.
Yep, is the crown of her husband. Okay, Ukarakav Ba'atzmosav Mevisha. Oops, Google thought I was talking to it. All right. And like Rakav Ba'atzmosav is Mevisha. Now, this, for those who were with us from the beginning, I think this takes us all the way back to chapter 10. Zecher Tzadik Livracha V'Shem Roshaim Yirkav. Anyone know what Rekev means? The memory of a tzaddik is for blessing, and the name of the wicked Yirkav. So Rekev means rot. Okay. Ukarakav ba'atzmosav mevisha. And like rot ba'atzmosav, in his bones, mevisha. This is a little hard to translate. It comes from the word busha.
From its disgrace?
Yeah, is a I'm going to translate it as shameful woman. Okay. And I think everyone translates this as shameful woman. Okay, meaning like it's just like Chayil is a quality of this woman. Mavisha is a quality of like the opposite woman. Okay. So that is our working translation here. Let's just quickly go through these other ones. Sadigon says, okay, we did Sadigon already. The Targum, I actually had to look this up ahead of time to make sure I got it. Itza Kesharta, a fit or proper, literally kosher wife. Kalila Labala is a crown to her husband. I don't know if this is a typo. I think it's supposed to say Itza. The Itza Bishta, but a bad wife, Hech Maltisa Bakaisa Hechna Mevda Garmoy de Gavra. I think I translated this correctly, but a bad wife is like a corrosive substance which destroys the bones of her husband. Now, I don't know if it's something, I don't know. I had a hard time finding this word kaisa, and I don't know like what subtlety the Targum is trying to bring out, but I guess what we see from here is that rot doesn't have to mean like rot, like spoilage, it's just something that, like that dissolves away the bones. Okay, so let's just take it like that. And then I want to show you Rabbeinu Yonah. I know we don't usually bring in Rabbeinu Yonah here, but he has a definition here, because one of the questions is going to be what is rot in the bones, and I feel like usually I like for us to answer the questions on our own, but it seems like this is a more of a factual thing, not an interpretation thing. He says Rekev Batmosav Mavisha, Isha Balas Mavisha, a shameful wife. Kirekev ba'atmos bala is like rot in the bones of her husbands. Shehu choli she'ein lo refuah. This rot is a disease that has no cure. Ki ha'etzem ha'nirkav lo yachlif, because you cannot replace a rotten bone. Okay, so according to Rabbeinu Yonah, it's an incurable disease. Okay, bone disease. Okay, and I don't know if you want to use an analogy, like a modern analogy of like, a incurable, terminal cancer or something like that in the bones, but something that's like, it's an internal disease that is, that you can't like, you can't amputate your bones. You can amputate your arm, but you can't, like if it's in all your bones. Okay, right, so that is our translation. And then we have our scroll, an accomplished woman. Okay, my guess is that accomplished woman is what they're taking for, the wealthy woman, like someone who's successful. Actually, let's say successful. Materially successful. I think that's broader. Materially successful woman is the crown of her husband, but a shameful one is like rot in his bones. Okay, Living Nach says a woman of valor is a crown for her husband, but a shameful woman is like rot in his bones. Alter says a worthy woman. Okay, that actually worthy is a good, that's actually a great translation of kosher. Worthy. Okay. Woman. Is her husband's crown, but like rot in his bones is a shameful wife. Now, usually I don't read the Alter's commentary if he gives away any ideas. I don't think he's giving away ideas, and I just want to read this to you because he does a good job of like bringing out the nuance of the language. He says, okay, a worthy woman. Okay, Fox, who's another modern commentator, hewing to the etymology, renders this as a woman of strength. Okay, that's like, I guess, the valor thing. All right, her husband's crown is like rot in his bones. In this instance, the antithesis, okay, who am I? 8 English students here. Am I on? Yeah. Okay. So antithesis is the opposite, right? So in this instance, the antithesis of the two versets diverges from the general pattern of stereotypical predictability, which is a fancy way of saying the opposites are counterintuitive. Okay, as in the 3 preceding lines, to exhibit an energy of biting satiric wit. After the crown image, which is conventional and decorous, the antithetical second verset moves from an adornment sitting on the head to something eating away the bones from within, suggesting that the badness of a bad wife has a more intense effect on the negative side than the goodness of a good wife on the positive side. The object of this strong simile, moreover, a shameful wife, one word in Hebrew mavisha, is held back to the very end of the line, thus becoming a kind of punch word. Okay, so it's just, I thought there was a nice little like literary analysis of the of what the pasuk is doing. And just to put this in plain English, he's making 3 points. He's saying that number one, it's not exactly analogous. If I ask you what's the opposite of a crown, you wouldn't say rot in the bones. Okay, so it's like a surprising opposite, which obviously we're gonna have to analyze. Secondly, the crown is something that is external to you, that beautifies you, whereas the rot is something internal to you, and the third thing is that it holds off on, it starts off with a description of her, of the good woman, and then it like starts the negative description, and then like you know, as you're listening to the pasuk, like who's it going to identify, and then it says the shameful one, you know. So again, I don't think that adds to our understanding. It's just a good way of talking through the pasuk. Okay, now we're ready for our questions. What are our questions here? And I know we asked a bunch already, but I'll leave it to you to formulate them.
I think your dad has a question. He's like raising his.
Okay, I can't see, so
we can't hear him.
And he's on mute. We're out of practice.
I had noise coming from in here, so.
Okay.
Worthy in what way? In what respect is she worthy? What is? How do we?
So let's do this as the general question, which is, what is the definition of Eishes Chayil in this context? Okay, and then like, let's say if it means valor, if it's valor, then valor in terms of what? If it's success, how successful? Okay, if it's diligent and upright, what does that mean? And if it's kosher, what does that mean? Yeah, okay, so basically definition questions here. But that's going to obviously be a main question. Yeah, Ayala?
What does it mean that she's the crown of her husband, and like what significance is that?
Okay, yeah. So what is the analogy of her being the crown, or a crown of her husband? Yeah.
Can I don't know how to formulate this question, but the Eishes Chayil seems to have earned her role or whatever through her own efforts, you know, being kosher. And whereas the shameful woman, how do you define what a shameful woman is or does to earn that?
Okay, good. So let's say, what is a shameful woman in this context? How does she, like, what makes her shameful? And it's interesting, the word shameful here is a kind of an unclear thing, because it's kind of functions as, this is clear in Hebrew, but mevisha can function as an adjective. I believe mevisha can function as an adjective or as a verb. So she could be described as shameful in that, like, she is filled, you know, is I don't know, she should be ashamed of herself, or shameful in the sense that she causes shame to other people, like she's the cause of shame to other people, you know. So I think that's like a deliberate ambiguity. Yeah, okay, good.
And what does it mean to rot in his bones?
Yeah, what is the analogy of like rot in his bones?
Also, I like what Alter pointed out about how that's like very internal versus external. So what's the significance of that?
Okay, so let's just lump that under a bigger question, which is, how are these two opposites? Okay, and we'll say, how is Eishes Chayil the opposite of shameful woman? Of I'll just say in Hebrew, Isha Mevisha. I'm going to actually put that up here also so we can use the Hebrew. Is a Mevisha, shameful woman. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And likewise, how is crown of her husband the opposite of like rot in his bones? Yeah.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
Isn't this obvious?
I don't think so.
You don't think it's obvious?
I mean, unless by that you mean that like Eishes Chayil.
Right, no, let me ask the question in a different way. Okay.
Yeah.
And this, I might be asking two questions here, but I'll just start off with, why is it specifically focusing on the husband instead of her?
Okay.
Right now, once you have that question, isn't it obvious that if you have someone in your corner who's not like a great person that'll keep you down, versus if you have someone who's going to help you excel, like that's someone who you want in your corner because like you guys are succeeding together.
Okay. So the first question I'm going to write down, which is, why is this framed in terms of her effect on him? Okay. The second question, which is a clear way of saying that this sounds obvious, is the answer is the chiddush, the new point in the pasuk, is going to be through the analogies, and the analogies are not by any means obvious, right? Like crown is a very specific type. There are many ways you can say that an Eishes Chayil will benefit her husband, but crown is a very specific analogy. And similarly, there are lots of ways you can say that the negative wife will impact him detrimentally, but rot in his bones is going to be the
right. I guess just on the surface, I'm kind of presuming a few things about the ateret of what it means.
Yeah, I think so.
Right.
Right.
I'm not giving an answer. I just sort of
before I call on my dad, then just one more point, which no one, I don't think anyone in this group is going to ask this, but I feel like I have taught this in high school before, and there's there's always going to be someone in the class, and again, I was teaching women. There's always going to be someone in the class who says, this is just objectifying women, like it's putting in terms of it's describing her as just like a feature of her husband. How would you respond to that question if you were giving a Mishlei Shiur? Because I have a response to that, and I think it's an obvious response, but I think it bears being said, because who knows who listens to these shiurim. And I don't know if they have that nasal voice that I just did. Yeah.
I mean, I hope I don't have that nasal voice, but that's not for me to say. And as a woman, I would say that I think that the objectification is also kind of like what you were just saying to Ariel, but like it's adding to the analogy. You know what I mean? Like, what does that mean that it's a crown for her husband? Well, that's going to give insight. It's not like, it's not just seen as like as a way to like not give her value.
Right. Okay. So that's definitely true. In other words, tell me if this is what you're saying, which is that this is not a statement about what a woman or a wife is. This is a particular, like all of Mishlei does, this is a particular benefit that will come from a good decision and a bad decision. And in this case, it sounds like it is, this, we didn't ask the question yet, but it sounds like this is advice directed to the husband, right? I mean,
everything in Mishlei is a binary.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And everything in Mishlei is not binary, right? This is just one feature. Yeah. Okay, that's a good answer. I have that is a perfectly acceptable answer. Anyone have another answer? I can think of two more.
I mean, I was thinking, isn't it criticizing like the man, like rather than the wife?
Right. That is also true, right? I mean, it's warning the man against making a bad decision, which we've seen lots of these things about. I don't know if we've seen it in the Monday Night Shiur, but certainly in the our morning shiur, and we've seen a lot of these pasukim where he's warning. This is what I was going to say, is that much of, if you had to say, one. I know we always ask who is the audience of the pasuk, but if you had to pick one audience for the entirety of Mishlei, what would you say just from reading the book? Like, and it's kind of a trick question because this really shows up more in the earlier prakim. Anyone know what I'm thinking of? So
I would say someone young. I would say someone just manifesting his desires and his plans for his life.
Okay, so it is someone young. It's someone more specific though, which is his son. Okay, if you look through all of Mishlei, the vast majority of pasukim are the advice from a father to the son. So like that it makes sense that he's going to be giving his son advice on who to marry and who not to marry. Okay, but here's how I would respond to the nasal version of the question. You could point to this and say that it's objectifying women. He devotes almost the entire last parak of Mishlei to praising the Eishes Chayil in her own right. Like the entire thing is glorifying her. So like you can't just take one little thing and then pounce on it and say like, oh, this is being sexist. I mean, and again, we haven't done this in Monday Night Shiur, but I know my high school students, we've been through this year. I mean, this is a very, very like for something written, I guess how long ago was this written? 2,300 years ago. I'm bad at the math here. For something written that long ago, 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, it's a pretty progressive picture of a woman, and not just in terms of like her material success, but in terms of her chachma and in terms of her like all of her other qualities. So like, take that, nasal question asker. Okay, yeah.
I actually don't know if I agree with that like argument, because I think that if anything, it can strengthen the nasal opinion, because you're saying that like you're taking this chapter of like all the qualities of a great woman, and you're saying like, look at all these things that are like in her own right, as you said,
right?
And you're saying, and all of that is only worth an adornment for a man. Like going back to this.
Saying if you read this whole thing as an elaboration on on our pasuk, you could say that if you want. Yeah. I guess I'm biased by my opinion of Eishes Chayil, like my reading of Eishes Chayil, and also like what the midrash. I know we never do midrash on Mishlei, but what the midrashim say about the Eishes Chayil, why you can like who this is about. Have you heard that? I think this is correct. That he wrote this about his mother, in praise of his mother. So I have to look for where it says that, but you could read it that way. And again, I'm also reading it in turn. Oh, interesting. This midrash says it's about Sarah. Okay, that's interesting. I don't see where he gets that from, but I'm learning this from from Rabbi Moskowitz's approach, which is that this is about like the ideal product of the Mishlei program, and therefore like I would say that's not just saying in terms of like an accessory to her husband, but I hear. Okay, so my dad had a question. Yeah.
Okay, so this may be an irrelevant doctor's observation.
Okay.
But bone is different from than any other part of the body. I mean, the rest of the body is visceral, is soft. Bone is the only thing that's firm and concrete.
Right. Okay.
All the things to compare it to, it could have been to the heart, it could have been to the brain.
Okay, that's a good question. Okay, so specifically, why focus on a disease of the bones? Right. Okay, that's good. Oh, you know what? I'm going to actually list the question that came up in the discussion just now, which is, excuse me, who is the audience of this pasuk? Again, I'm pretty sure that this is for the, actually, no, let's make this into a question, okay? It's pretty clear that this is formulated as advice for who a man should and shouldn't marry, okay? But does this go both ways, right? In other words, is this advice gender? In other words, hold on a second. In other words, is this advice gender specific, or could this be applied to advising a woman about what kind of man to marry? Okay, and we see psukim like this in Mishlei in both cases. There are psukim, for example, about, we've done this in the mornings, about like the contentious wife, the wife who is like hypercritical of every single thing that her husband does. And those psukim you could reverse, that it would be just as miserable if you had a woman whose husband was hypercritical, but then there's other types of advice, about that are clearly geared towards men and women, about their selection of a wife specifically, So,
isn't there another option?
What's the other option?
If it is advice for the man, saying which woman you shouldn't marry, can there be advice for, a woman to not be like this, like there?
Oh, that's
like,
also true, right? Yeah, that's a good point, right. Actually, I'm gonna okay, so alternatively, could this be advice for the woman about what?
Well, really either or too, because it could be man or woman.
Right. For the woman or man about what kind of spouse to be or not to be. First time we're inadvertently quoting Shakespeare in a Mishlei Shiur. Also, you could say, you know how when we have, I can't remember if we've had any psukim like this for in our what do you call it, our Monday Night Mishlei Shiur. But you have psukim, let's say, that are about a king, okay? And we usually, what we do is we say we understand the pasuk to be about a king, but then some of those psukim can extend to any position of authority, So to here, this is a pasuk about a marital relationship. Can this be extended to other relationships? In other words, could you apply this to? I'll write this out. Also, can this pasuk apply to other types of relationships? Okay, for example, to friends, to business partners, okay, to
father, son.
Yeah, right. Parent and child, right? Or is this specific to marriage? Yeah.
Well, it's funny because you're kind of implying another question here is why specifically, your wife?
Right. Yeah. Okay. So that's a good question. And if
another
so, why express this in terms of marriage? Yeah. Yeah. Again, I am assuming that this is specifically about marriage, but I think it pays to ask these questions because it opens you up to different readings, and we got to be thorough here. Okay.
There's nothing about physical beauty in here.
Correct. That is true. That is true. Yeah.
It's not about a trophy wife.
Right. Oh, so you know what? So that actually raises another question, which is, and now this question might not have an answer. Like we might be wrong to demand an answer to this question from the pasuk, but I'm going to ask it anyway, which is, what might cause a person to make this bad decision, right? Like, again, it's a little bit clearer with the psukim about the contentious wife, that like, if we've all seen examples of like marriages where, like, you have one or parent-child relationships where one of the parties is like just constantly critical of the other one, and you always wonder yourself, like, why did they get themselves into this relationship? So this might not have one answer, but I think we should ask it anyway in case we can get insight. Okay, so let's do this. I'm going to attempt to copy and paste this into the chat, and that way I can focus on the questions. Okay, so I copied and pasted the pasuk in the chat. I'm going to focus on the questions here. Let's have our minute of thinking, and then we will take people who have full or near full ideas first, and then we will take half-baked ideas after that. So let's take a minute to think. And if you have another question, you can interrupt. And again, just to reemphasize my response to Ariel, the key to this is the idea is going to emerge from the analogies. I think that's clear here. So your explanation of the pasuk has to account for those analogies, and ideally has to account for how they're opposites.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
Why crown?
Yeah. Okay. Why specifically crown? Okay. Who has an approach? Yeah,
I can see.
sure.
The crown is external and the bones are internal.
Right.
And so, I mean, I don't know where to go from there, but that seems to be one of the qualities.
Okay, yeah. So that is definitely true. Is that the way that crowns function is that they are for other people, right? Is that they're visible, and the king does not need a crown for himself, right? The king, I mean, in other words, he knows he's a king, but the king is for the crown is to signify that he's a king to the subjects, and it's visible and external. Yeah. Ariel, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I could start something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Wait, can you see? Okay, so I'm gonna just try to attempt to define what a shameful woman is.
Okay, sure.
Maybe it's an individual who is kind of like the antithesis of what needs to be represented in the household or in a specific environment. Meaning, like if my goal for like I don't know, anything. Let's say my goal for like I don't know, like a candy shop is to, have sales.
Yeah.
Right? So people could buy candy, and like one of my workers kind of just like takes the candy and throws it into the garbage every time.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, like that is being shameful to the entire nature of the business.
Right.
Or like, right. It's kind of like the antithesis of what's supposed to occur in that environment.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to push that. I mean, I'm not saying that you're wrong, but I'm just going to push that question a little bit further. And I'm actually going to do this by quoting another pasuk. I think it's in 14. Yeah. First pasuk in chapter 14. Chachmos nashim bansa beisa v'iveles biadeha sehersenu. So chachmos nashim, I think they translate that as the wise among women. Okay, meaning with the women who are wise. Or sorry, the woman, the wise among women, singular, builds her house. The iveles biadeha sehersenu, but the foolish woman tears down the house with her own hands. Okay, so that's like the direct expression of your idea that, like, the woman who applies mishlei chachma and sees the consequences of her actions is going to end up knowing what the household is about, and let's say, like, the household is to provide, an environment where all of the members of the household can develop as human beings and as and in their Torah as much as possible. Let's just say that that's the goal. So she's going to employ her chachma to contribute to that project. But the foolish woman, not only is she going to not contribute to that project, her actions are going to undermine the whole thing, and that's what I think when she'll tear down her own house. It doesn't mean physically she'll tear it down, but she'll like be throwing out the candy, like you're saying. Okay, so that's definitely a true idea. The question, though, is why focus on shame? Okay, shame is a thing. I mean, let me ask, maybe this will give some direction here. We said that on the surface, the crown and rot in the bones does not seem to be, the two halves don't seem to be opposites. Okay, but can you think of a quality maybe that you can see as opposites in the two halves of the pasuk? I know that. Yeah.
Okay, so you okay, fine. So I do have an idea for that. The opposites of a terabala and ukarka v'asmostav. I just thought it would have been more methodological to define, shameful woman first. But
and by the way, you are correct that and let me make this clear here. I think you are right that this woman is a woman who is destroying the household, but the question is why frame her as a shameful woman? In other words, I think you're right about identifying who she is. The question is, why is it highlighting the shame aspect?
Right. Maybe that'll come out in the opposites.
Okay, sure.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think what your father said, I think he's right. I just along those lines, like there's the I'll start with the easy one, okay. like the crown, it's kind of like a symbol for, the individual's kind of like power, that he's expressing in his household or in his environment.
Okay.
It's kind of like, it's like an effect that's being transmitted to the world. Like this, I'm now an established individual that's fulfilling my goal, my purpose.
Right.
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 So when you have someone, helping you with that, it's kind of reinforcing it or enforcing it. For
Okay.
you, right?
Yeah. All right. That makes sense.
Versus, yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, if it's on this, it's fine.
Okay. Maybe I'm going to make a move that is not a new idea. Just, I think, answers this question here, which commenting on what my dad was saying, that okay, what is the opposite of busha, of shame? What quality was
Glory
it?
or honor?
Glory or honor. And where do you see glory and honor in the first half of the pasuk?
Eishes Chayil.
Like you hear often a crowning achievement. So again, based on her efforts, resulting in something for the good of, of people that would visibly see that she is a leader, or whatever. I don't know that there's a counterpart for the shame, though. What except for the Scarlet Letter.
I think what you just said is the counterpart. I think the counterpart is the crown. The crown is the way that the king is glorified, and glory or honor is the opposite of shame. So I think that's going to be our unifier in terms of the two halves of the pasuk, is that what we're talking about here is we're narrowing in on the subject, which is the effects of a wife on the husband's honor or dishonor, right? And so it's saying that if his wife is an Eishes Chayil, that is going to bring him honor and prestige and glory and credit, whatever word you want to use. And if his wife is the opposite of an Eishes Chayil, then it'll bring him shame. But now the question is, how does the rot and the bones fit in? You see the move I'm making, this is just in terms of methodology here. There's a time to try to come up with an idea for the whole pasuk, and there's a time to follow the breadcrumbs. And I'm just following the breadcrumbs right now. That Mevisha is I had the same line of thought as Ariel, which is that we've learned enough Mishlei to know that what is this woman in the second half of the pasuk? Well, she's probably someone who makes very short-term decisions. She probably is either going for short-term pleasure or avoiding short-term pain. She probably is she's probably allowing her emotions to distort her thinking. So of all of these qualities, and that's going to lead her to make bad decisions that are going to harm the household. But of all these qualities, why frame her as shameful? And then that's when the light bulb goes off. Oh, it's framing her shameful, but it's framing the Eishes Chayil as the opposite of shameful, which is someone who provides glory to her husband. And that's now we have a stew cooking, And now the question is, what does the rot and the bones have to do with anything?
Yeah, so I can try to answer that.
Sure.
So maybe you could say that the bones, the bones, a person's bones kind of, they provide them, strength and stability and, foundation to, I don't know, to walk around with, or stability, structure.
Yeah, structure, right.
So, so I think I kind of like the incurable bone disease, because it's kind of like, once you have a disease in your bones, it's going to deteriorate, the structure of what you're attempting to build.
Right.
And once it's destroyed, it's like the complete opposite of, like a crown. Like a crown represents a kingdom versus
it's like a lasting thing.
But a bone is it's like not disintegrating. It's not deteriorating.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. All right, that's good. So,
is there an element of external versus internal that seems to be coming through pretty strongly, because rot is not necessarily something you see external?
Yeah, so that is an interesting thing, because it does seem like there is an external and an internal dimension here. The rot is internal, but then the shame is external. So it sounds like that this guy's going to get hit on both fronts. He's going to be publicly shamed because of the things that Ariel was saying, is that like, she is, like, again, we're talking about, again, the assumption here is we're talking about like a Torah household, right? So let's say like, what types of things are the shame? What are some examples? Let's just get some concrete examples. What would the opposite, in what ways would the opposite of an Eishes Chayil bring shame to the husband in a Torah household? Just give me some examples.
Spending money.
Okay, right. So let's say spending money on like frivolous or harmful things. What else?
Treating her people around her, badly.
Okay, right. Bad interpersonal conduct.
Promiscuity.
House.
Promiscuity.
Okay, promiscuity, right? That's another one. Child raising, right? She's not going to raise her children properly. Mismanagement of her own finances, right? In terms of like not just like spending frivolously, but like not paying the bills. So that's the type of thing that we're talking about. And so I do think I think we have fleshed this out that on the one hand, this is going to bring shame to this guy because people are going to know that all these problems are stemming from the wife. And it's going to create an internal rot that threatens the stability of the of his life, right? I mean, maybe that's what it's saying by putting in terms of him instead of the house, is that it's dissolving the thing that gives it structure. My dad has a question.
I don't know if this is too much of a leap. Can we call a disease of the bones, a rotting of the bones? Can we call it paralysis? Is that what we're really looking at?
I don't think of paralysis, no. My guess is if this was actually talking about, my guess is that this is probably something like cancer, Okay. Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking paralysis. Okay, yeah.
I mean, it might lead to compromising your mobility, but it seems like,
in the sense that there's nothing that the husband can do about this.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do about it. It's yeah, you can't apply ointment to it. You can't treat it. You can't amputate it. Yeah, Ariel?
Yes, I'm still not understanding like why you use the term shameful woman.
Because the point is that, okay, so, well, it's hard for me to say. I mean, I have an idea on the pasuk, but are we ready for that now? I mean,
I guess according to this idea, I don't really see, like, I don't know, like, I feel like shameful versus like any other intense word that you could use to destroy something is, would be more appropriate. No, I'm sorry. Another word instead of shameful would be more appropriate, because shameful doesn't, to me, at least in my mind, maybe I don't understand the definition of shameful, but like at least the idea that I'm presenting, like, I feel like it would require a more intense word than shameful.
Okay, so I just realized, I just had an aha moment, which I realized that I think there are complete opposites in the pasuk. Okay, let me show you. So if you take Eishes Chayil to be a materially successful woman, and what we're talking about, again, we're talking about mishleically materially successful, which means that she uses chachma, and she's and the material success is the sign of the fact that she's running her life and her household with chachma. Okay, that is talking about the internal viability and thriving of the household. That corresponds to the rot in his bones, which is the internal threatening of the stability. And then the crown is glory and honor to the person, and the shame is the opposite of glory and honor. So we're saying, so in other words, we're talking about like in many things, the good wife is going to bring about two levels of success, of benefits. Is not only will the husband's household and family thrive, but he will get glory for it. But the bad Mishleic actor or wife, not only will she compromise the stability of the household, but she'll bring shame to him. Now, that's not the full idea. I'm just trying to point out how I'm reading the pasuk. Yeah, Mayan?
Yeah, I had an idea that like is very similar to Ariel's that I think might like help.
Sure.
I was just thinking about like why a crown specifically.
Yeah.
And I think that like something about a crown is that a crown is like extra beauty, meaning like you like saying like you can't put like lipstick on a pig, it's still a pig. Same thing, like you can't like for someone to wear a crown and for it to bring glory, they have to be like a justifiably glory. This is really embarrassing. You were my English teacher.
Yeah.
Like a glory worthy person.
Yeah.
And I think that like something that also about the crown is that it's not necessarily permanent. Like you can get your crown taken away.
Right.
So
That's true.
what like I thought from there is that in terms of like partnership, whether it's like marriage or like a business partner,
Yeah.
you need to be able to like be accountable for yourself, but the business partner can add extra glory to it. Now, why it's shameful is because like shamefulness is like you don't even want to be seen. So like if you have the opposite, it's not that it's not that it won't bring extra glory, it's that it would actually ruin you yourself.
Right.
And you would be like, yeah.
Okay, that's really, really good. Okay, can we explain the mechanism? I don't know if this is necessary for the idea, but I think it would be enlightening. What is the mechanism like? Let's going back to what I think my mom was saying earlier, that the Eishes, you read through Eishes Chayil and all these qualities are hers, are her qualities, right? So how does that bring glory to the husband? And then similarly, let's say she's that he's married to a jerk. Why should that shame him? Like, why doesn't he just say like, okay, that's her, like that's not me? And I know it sounds like an obvious question, but I think if we answer it, then we'll get clarity and an idea.
I feel like if you think about like regular couples that
yeah,
and like let's say the wife does something so amazing and it's just like, oh wow, what a good person, what a good couple, they're so great, like they're so amazing. But then like if like the wife does something like bad necessarily, it's like you can't like you associate that bad thing with the couple as well, because once you're married, you are considered like one.
Right. Okay. So this is really what I'm struggling with here, is that I think I could see two routes, and they might both be true. You're explaining it that the way that the shame and both the shame and the kavod come to the husband is because of the way they're seen. They're seen as a unit. Okay. I'm going to take a slightly different approach. Actually, what I'm going to do, I think this is a good time. Let's read the Rabbeinu Yonah, because my idea comes from the Rabbeinu Yonah, and then we'll develop this, and we could always take it in different directions. Okay. Rabbeinu Yonah says, so we already read part of the Rabbeinu Yonah, but now we'll read the whole thing. Okay. Rabbeinu Yonah says like this: Eishes Chayil ateres bala kone tiferes b'ma'ala sa. He will acquire splendor through her virtue. Kihi kinyano, because again, this is not, don't take this too literally. She is his possession. Ka'atara, she is ater v'yispire bal ha'atara. That he glorifies himself with, like a person who wears a crown glorifies himself with. Okay. Then he says, "Ukarekav ba'atzmos of mavisha, isha mavisha karekav ba'atzmos ba'ala shu choli she'ein lo refua." So a shameful woman is like the rot in the bones of her husband, which is a disease that has no cure. Ki ha'etzem hanirkav lo yachlif, because you cannot exchange a rotten bone. Gam isha mavisha ein leba'ala refuas ta'ala micholia. So too, the husband. The husband of a shameful wife cannot have any cure from her illness. Kolzman shihi tachtav, as long as she is with him. Kihine bal korcho, because against his will, tzarich ladur beveso, then he needs to live in his own house. Lo yuchal lahachil devareho umasa, and he won't be able to restrain, to hold back. Or sorry, he won't be able to. I don't know if lahachil means to hold back or to tolerate her words and her actions. V'gam yesh lishmoa min hamashal hazeh. And you can also learn from this analogy. Okay, so this is the alternative approach I'm presenting to Mayan. I think this is an alternative approach, that when the man clings to his wife, she is compared to being like one of his bones. Kadavar shenemar, as it says, as Adam said, etzem me'atzamai. Let me just look at these pasukim here. So when Adam was created, when Chava was created from Adam, it says, "Vayivin Hashem Elokim es hatzela asher lakach min Adam leisha." Hashem Elokim built the rib or the side that was taken from Adam into a woman. Vayiveha al ha'adam, and he brought her to Adam. V'yomer ha'adam, and the man said, "Zos hapam, this time, etzem me'atzamai ubasar mi basari, a bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. Lezos yikare isha, for this reason she shall be called isha, ki me'ish lukachazos, because she has been taken from a man." So that to me is describing this thing where there is a very strong, in psychology, we call this an identification between the husband and the wife, that he views her as an extension of himself. And this is not unique to the husband-wife thing. I mean, this is all love. through identification, and it's the same way that a parent views the child as an extension of themselves, and therefore when your loved one feels pain, you feel pain, or when your loved one gets glory, then you feel a sense of accomplishment and pride as well. So again, I'm not disagreeing with what Mayan is saying. I think both of them are true. Mayan is saying that that based on the way that they are identified by others, then whatever shames and glories she brings about will attach to him. And I'm saying that internally, psychologically, he views her as an extension of himself. And therefore, when she does something shameful, he's going to cringe also. And when she does something that is, glorious, then he'll feel proud as well. I'll finish reading the Ben Yona and then we'll analyze. The kasher isha mevisha. And when a woman is shameful, it is like there's rot in one of his bones. He's ashamed of her ways, and he will acquire shame from her actions. And this shame will penetrate to the depths of his soul. Yeah, that's where I was getting it from. In the same way that a person is embarrassed of his own guilt and his own blemishes. In other words, because of his identification with her, then he's going to view her faults as his own defects, and that's going to bring him shame. And this is coming to warn you, lachkor hetev, to investigate very well, and to guard yourself as much as possible, mikachas isha mevisha, to guard yourself against marrying a shameful woman, and don't covet the silver and gold on her and take her for yourself. Anyone know what that's a literary reference to in Tanakh or in Chumash? It's an interesting reference. It's actually talking about coveting the silver and gold that's on Avodah Zarah, on an idol, and taking it for yourself. I'm not sure why he's using that. Okay, so let me just present my full idea based on this Rabbeinu Yonah. And this actually was one of the pasukim I used to teach in high school. I don't think I actually taught this. I don't remember doing this with Ayala or Mayan. So this was back in the day when I wrote up summaries. So I have my 4-sentence summary here, which I want to read. Okay, so here's what I wrote. So I called this Malignant Marriage. That was the title of the pasuk. A man strongly identifies with his wife. Consequently, if he has an intelligent wife, he will pride himself on her virtues. But if he has a shameful, i.e. unintelligent wife, and by intelligent, I mean mishleically intelligent, I mean like IQ, he will experience agony over her shortcomings as though they were his own, in addition to suffering the consequences of her irrational decision-making. So that's, I want to take a moment to underscore that like her decisions will actually bring about all these bad things in the household, right? Mismanaging of the funds, raising kids who are like, brats, doing actions in public, which are like, which bring about a bad reputation. So in addition to suffering the consequences, he's going to feel psychological shame from even being associated with her. Okay. All right, next sentence. Like rot in the bones, a painful and incurable illness, being stuck in a marriage with an unintelligent woman is an agonizing condition which brings constant and severe pain. So I'm learning it that it is, it's the rot in the bones is a chronic condition. In other words, it's not like the pain comes and goes. No, if it's in your bones, it's like it's with you all the time, and it's incurable. Yeah, I know that there is, that in the case of an illness, there might not be a cure. They can get divorced, but like, first of all, you have to realize that divorce was much rarer back then than it is now. And like, it's not just so simple that you just like get divorced, that's not always feasible. Shlomo HaMelech's use of the painful illness metaphor also points to two reasons why a man might fall into the trap of marrying such a woman, in spite of the fact that he is aware of her flaws beforehand. So this is when I'm trying to answer the question that I raised, which is, why would a person fall into this trap? Okay, and by the way, I believe this goes both ways. I think that women can fall into this trap of marrying the wrong kind of husband. So number one, he believes he can change her and cure her of her irrationality. Two, he anticipates that the pain he'll experience in marriage will be no worse than the relatively mild frustration he experiences from these flaws before marriage. Okay, those are the two mistakes. In truth, it is unlikely that he will be able to cure her, since people do not change their nature so easily. And his suffering will be much greater when they're married, since he will be with her constantly. I guess I put in parentheses here, since even the greatest pain is endurable as long as it's perceived as temporary, whereas permanent pain brings increased suffering. Okay, so in other words, the two mistakes are, don't go into the relationship thinking you can change the other person, because you can't. Okay, change only comes about. And again, I know this is like a cliche already, but like, if you look at how difficult it is to change yourself, then forget about changing another person. And yeah, there are some individuals who can change, but that's not, you don't want to bet on that and enter into a marriage with someone who has bad mitos. Secondly, and this is a mistake that if you've listened to any of like the dating shiurim from our, from the various Rabbeinu and our yeshiva, then they always make this point of like, the big mistake is to view the fun and enjoyment of the dating, take that and then view marriage as just that, 24/7, but that's not actually how the marriage works. And, and once the honeymoon, period is over and you're stuck with this person day in and day out, then if they have good qualities, then those good qualities will increase the love and the enjoyment. And if to the extent that they have bad qualities, it'll amplify it. And since he's going to feel stuck, then that's going to be a then he's going to experience this rotting of the bones. And that's why he might make this mistake, because he'll say, okay, I'm aware that she has this bad quality, but it's not so bad. But he's not picturing what it's going to be living with this person. And again, this also I do think applies to a certain extent to other types of relationships. Like, this is why I always used to when I would advise my my high school students when they're going to seminary, to not be roommates with their best friends, because there are many cases where like they get on each other's nerves, and because they're such good friends and they have such strong identification, it ends up becoming like horrible like fights, and they can't stand them. And this can apply to a business partner. There's these cases of where you enter into a partnership where your finances are wrapped up together, and this person has this bad quality, and you're stuck with them. Again, you're not permanently stuck in the sense that you could always like dissolve the partnership, but it's very messy, So I'm not saying, I still think this pasuk is mainly about marriage, because you don't identify with your business partner's flaws or your roommate's flaws in the same way as you identify with like your spouse's flaws. But I do think there are elements that can be expanded elsewhere. Okay, I'll take questions on either this or Rabbeinu Yonah or on the pasuk. Yeah, Ariel, you're up.
Yeah. Can I add something, or it might be
sure.
like a slight variation of your idea?
Sure.
I liked everything you said, and it's funny how like the woman is not necessarily like a bad person, right? It doesn't seem like, it's just like like, all right, whatever, it's like she has like some whatever twerks or whatever you want to call them, it's not something that it's small, it's not, I don't think it's anything major.
Or it could even be like, it could be something like, just to give an example, like that quality I mentioned of, let's say, being like hypercritical and very like mockbeat on stuff, that could be an amazing quality if she's the CEO of a company, like for getting her employees in order. But if she's expressing it in the household with every move that her husband makes, then it ends up creating friction in the relationship, like it could just be a question of like a mismatching of, every personality strength can also be a weakness or a liability in certain contexts.
Yeah. So like the question, that I had was like, it seems like a very extreme analogy that like the that there will be a disease in your bones, for a type of person who's just a shameful person, you know what I mean? So I think that maybe like it's so the question is like, it doesn't seem balanced, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think maybe you could say that like, no, it's like the reality is like, even though it might be like something small or in your eyes, like the feeling you'll feel when you are married will be extremely intense, and there's no way out.
Yeah, I that's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say that Mishlei does use hyperbole, exaggeration to drive home, this emotional point, and objectively speaking, it's not that bad, but subjectively speaking, it's horrible, and that's really what's going to motivate you to not make this decision. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, next.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't put my hand up.
Oh yeah.
Okay. I just was wondering. I'm a like preschool Mishlei student, but is there somewhere a counterpart to this as far as the addressing the husband's accountability, or what happens with the efforts of Eishes Chayil being a crown to the husband, presumably it's like there's a symbiosis and, you know, they each help each other. But like, is there something about like a shameful man bearing some responsibility for his wife acting the way she does? Or I don't know how to.
That's a good question. I mean, the vast majority of psukim are aimed at men, you know, and talking about the man who lives as a chacham and the man who doesn't. And so that would definitely have an impact. I think just because from what I said before, that Mishlei is literally Mishlei is addressed as a father's advice to his son, then I don't think that advice shows up as much. I mean, there are cases that talk about his effect on the household. You know, I can't think of any offhand about what you're asking.
Okay, I was just curious because
yes, I just don't know.
You know, obviously, if the Eishes Chayil is putting these efforts into for the good of her household, which of course includes her husband, he's not a part of the household, then she would be more encouraged to continue her journey with a supportive or whatever husband. I didn't know how to define his role.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So I guess that I was bothered by what we were just discussing, that the husband gets this crown of glory, no matter what kind of jerk he is. I mean, it doesn't really define it, but then reading what you wrote here, the assumption is that a woman of valor, this woman is going to choose a good husband. She's not going to make the mistake.
That's another. Yeah, I was thinking about that also. Is that I was wondering if that was the case. Is that that a true Eishes Chayil is going to be very selective about the type of husband that she marries. You know, that's true. I'm also just associating to something else, which is interesting. This is not a direct comment on anything that was just said, but I was thinking about the end of Mishlei with Eishes Chayil, and it is an interesting thing that Sheker hachein v'heva hayofi. So chein here means like charisma. Charisma is false, and beauty is futile or temporary. Isha yiras Hashem hisis halal. A woman who fears Hashem, she should be praised. Tenu la mipriyadeha. Give her the fruit of her hands, which means like, you know, the outcomes of her actions. V'yahalaluha basharim ma'aseha, and her actions will praise her in the gates. It is interesting that it's depicting. I know I'm just picking and choosing these pasukim, but like this is the concluding pasuk about Eishes Chayil, and it is saying that her actions are going to speak for themselves and bring her glory in a different way than the husband. In other words, I have to think about this a little bit more about whether the way that he gets glory from her is different from the way that she gets glory from her own actions. You know, like in other words, it's not saying that people will admire her because of her husband. It's saying that people will admire her because of her own actions. But there is this phenomenon that people will admire the husband more because of his wife. That just bears some additional thought. Ayala?
I feel like another, maybe similar to what you're saying just now, but also another option for the thing that you and Mayan were both saying about like how she reflects onto him. I feel like what I was thinking of when you said that was like, you choose who to marry. So like the man is choosing her. So either he's choosing like the Eishes Chayil or this like other person.
Right.
And I feel like we do say that like if you want to see what someone's like, look at their friends. Right. And there's an idea of like the people who people spend their time with reflects onto them.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
So not even by like association, but more of like their decisions. Yeah,
meaning who your friends are or who you're in a relationship with is a reflection of your values ultimately, you know. And that says a lot. Okay. I think that's good. Let me just see if there's any other. I mean, there's a lot of other mafarshim, obviously, but I think this might be a good stopping place for tonight.
Can I actually just ask another question in terms of reading the pasuk?
Yeah.
So when you were using the opposite for Eishes Chayil is the opposite of Ugraka ve'asmotav.
Yeah.
And the opposite of a Terabala is Mavisha.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Is the because like I had a whole other way of reading it. which may result in a new idea, but it seems like a Tarabala is the opposite of the attribute, which is Mavisha, meaning
Right.
there's something
Correct.
else that's the opposite of a Tarabala,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
not necessarily Mavisha itself. So they're, you know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah,
another-
and just the way that I think I'm looking at that is it is showing the
I'm sorry, the Eishes Chayil. I meant the Eishes Chayil. Like the Eishes Chayil is really not the opposite of Kurkov Vesmosa.
right. It really is the opposite of Mavisha.
It's the opposite of Mavisha, but I'm wondering, like, what is the opposite of Eishes Chayil?
Right. So yeah.
Like,
I mean,
what individual is not,
yeah. So I don't know if you've noticed this as we've been discussing this idea. I don't actually think we need to define Eishes Chayil precisely in order to get this idea. Like we've talked about this before about how, let's say you have a lot of psukim about laziness. Some psukim, in order to understand the idea, you have to define laziness. But other psukim, you just need to know that this is about laziness, and then and it's focusing on one particular feature. So the more we were talking about this, the more I'm realizing it really doesn't matter which of these definitions you use for Eishes Chayil. The idea of the pasuk is really focusing on the effects of the right choice in a wife on the husband and the effects of the wrong choice. So too with the Mavisha. I don't know if you actually need to define the Mavisha. All you need to know is that we're talking about someone who is making decisions that result in shame for the husband. I will point out though that there is another pasuk which I think we did in chapter 10. Yeah. Oger Bakait's Bain Maskil, one who gathers in the harvest in the summer is an intelligent son. Nirdam Bakatzir, but one who's asleep at the harvest, Ben Mavish, is a shameful son. And so the Mefarshim on our pasuk quote this one and show how shameful is in Mishlei often the opposite of intelligent. And I think that actually might have been why in my my summary I used the word intelligent. And you could say that it's shameful in two senses. One is the sense that we were talking about before, is that it's going to bring shame onto the people in the household. The other one, though, is like almost like what you said in your candy analogy, is that if the whole thing that makes a person a human being is their Telem Elokim, their intelligence and their ability to think and to make decisions intelligently, then if you've corrupted that, then you should be ashamed of yourself. Like that is a truly shameful thing if you can't do the one thing that you were created to do.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay, I think this is a good idea, and I think it is going to be better for us if we stop now than to try to develop a whole new idea right now. But there's a lot more to think about, and it was a nice. I'm glad we got to do a pasuk that was not connected to what we did before. Feels like a nice fresh start. Yep. Okay, yeah. So Bli Neder, see you next week, and or before then if we have other shiurim. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.